Shalom and welcome to another episode of the Two Jews, 10 Opinions podcast. I'm Ailee Shanes.
And I'm Levi D'Amato.
We are, again, very excited for you to join us on this week's episode. It's a special episode where you have a very special guest, but we will get back to that in just a moment. Levi, we had a very interesting discussion before we came into the booth and to record this podcast episode. Levi, you're telling me you had how many donuts last night?
Well, okay, my parents listen to the podcast, and, my mom is going to be disappointed if I tell her, but I had 3 donuts yesterday from Krispy Kreme.
In the span of how many
I would say, 2 hours, but that's being generous, probably.
Okay.
But they have, a new donut, and I don't have to text my friend and find out what the name of the flavor was, but it's, filled with cream, and it has these crumbles on top.
Ooh,
it was incredible.
That sounds good.
But then we got into talking about what's better, Dunkin' Donuts or Krispy Kreme.
Yeah.
But it's not really I like both of them just for different reasons.
So here's my thing, and this is what I've always said to everybody, right? Krispy Kreme, their glazed original donut, yes, by far, is amazing. When you compare a glazed original donut from Krispy Kreme to Dunkin' Donuts, obviously the original glaze at Krispy Kreme wins. But if you talk about any other specialty flavors, Boston cream, chocolate glazed, etc., I don't know. I think that Dunkin' Donuts is the better option.
I don't like glazed donuts, just a plain donut.
Have you ever had Krispy Kreme's plain glazed donut?
No, yeah, of course I've had it, but
it wasn't an amazing experience.
No,
for
it's
you.
a good donut. It's a good donut.
And they make it fresh.
They do.
They make it fresh.
They do. All right.
I really like the
I'm
Krispy Kreme
feeling the
donut.
effects of the donuts
You're feeling the
right
effects of the
now in my
donut?
stomach.
Okay.
I need to eat some vegetables after the podcast. But okay, do you want to introduce our guest?
Yeah, so we have a very, very special guest on today's episode. We talked to him a few days ago. Right now, we're recording on a Sunday, but we talked to him on Thursday. We have tech entrepreneur, tech specialist, and also a huge Israel advocate. One of the biggest and most world-renowned Israel advocates in the world, Hillel Fuld. We got to talk to him, and specifically we talked to him about his perspective on the huge pressure that is being put on Israel right now from the world. We just got the UN ruling on the genocide case on Israel. So we talked a lot about that.
We interviewed him before the ruling came out.
We interviewed him before because the ruling came out on Friday.
Yeah.
So yeah, we talked a lot about that. It was very interesting conversation.
International court, not the UN.
International
yeah, sorry.
court?
I was just
okay,
clarifying
guys. I'm
that.
sorry that.
No, I didn't. I just figured out.
Yeah, that's okay.
We try to be the most accurate on our podcast.
100%.
Yeah.
So we talked to him about that and some other various topics here and there, but that was mostly what we were specifying. So we're gonna turn it over to our conversation with Hillel Fuld right now. He's an Israel tech business advisor, blogger, and he's one of the most influential Israel advocates in the world. Hillel Fuld, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. Thanks for having me.
All right. Hillel, the reason we wanted you on this podcast is we wanted to talk specifically about, for this episode, on a lot of the world's pressure on Israel right now. We've talked a lot about what happened on October 7th, and the war in general, but the pressure that Israel is experiencing right now. We wanted to really talk to you about that. Can you tell me, in your opinion, where do you think this pressure stems from? Any certain ideologies, any certain reasonings for this that you have seen?
So, I mean, it's easy to pull the anti-Semitism card, right? Let's just not let the Jews defend themselves. And there definitely is some truth to that. I'm not going to deny it, and I'm not going to pretend that that's not a thing. It is a thing. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about the narrative. It's all about, the Palestinians kind of embracing the narrative of we're so oppressed, we're the victim, we're hard. But in reality, no matter how you want to look at it, no matter how you want to define what an aggressor, what an oppressor is, Israel's not the aggressor. It's the other way around. Really, you can look at, who started this thing. done. That's Hamas, clearly. Like you can look anything, any way you want to look at it, Israel's not the aggressor. But they own that narrative, and it doesn't matter that it's not true. And the world likes an underdog. It's just, it gets clicks. That's really the bottom line.
Why do you think that idea is so influential in the world in general? I mean, not just in the Western world, but in other countries as well. Why do you think that idea is so influential to people?
I mean, I'm not a psychologist or a sociologist, but I would imagine there is some psychological element there of kind of like, I guess, kind of guilt, and for immoralities and atrocities that have been done throughout history. And it's like, okay, well, now we're trying to make up for that, and let's protect the underdog. When the underdog here, quote unquote, the underdog is Hamas, it's rapists, it's pedophiles, it's murderers, it's terrorists. So like, it's very ironic. There's tons of irony in this war, but that's just one of them, which is that these liberal human rights activists, who stand for equal rights and women's rights and LGBTQ, are now standing with Hamas, a terrorist organization that would literally hang them if they had a chance. It's hard to believe.
Are you confident or are you hopeful about the future of how the world is going to view Israel after this? Or do you think that it's just going to stay the same or even get worse? Because for a lot of countries, Israel's kind of like a parastate, if you will. So do you think new countries will label Israel as this, or what do you think the trend is looking like right now?
I mean, I think we have to take a broader perspective on this. Someone wrote very accurately, they said anti-Semitism is not because of Israel. Israel needs to exist because of anti-Semitism, right? And so, the anti-Zionist and the genocide and all the stuff that they're, masking their anti-Semitism with, it's transparent. We see right through it. Every generation, there's a new excuse for anti-Semitism. It's the same old stuff with a new mask. And so, I don't think you could put the genie back in the bottle, as they say. I don't think, anti-Semitism is going anywhere. I think we've reached a new phase, and I think just on a higher level, on a broader perspective, generally speaking, throughout history, when there's an empire that's, incredibly strong and dominant, and their morality goes out the window, and then the anti-Semitism spikes, that's the end of that empire. You see it in the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, the Egyptian Empire, the Nazi Empire. And so, as much as, I have gratitude to America, obviously I grew up there, and, they were good to my family. I think that we're reaching the end of the American empire because, morality is just out the window and anti-Semitism is rampant. And so I'm not too optimistic about the future of the Western world, specifically the United States.
That's interesting. So you kind of see anti-Semitism as like canary in the coal mine sort of thing for looking at.
I just think they go hand in hand. I think it's a longer conversation, but I think that it's not that it's going to fall because of anti-Semitism. It's that when an empire is reaching its end, it tries to scapegoat the Jews. And so when we see anti-Semitism spike the way it spiked, it's a good indication that empire, is reaching its end. I don't know. I'm not saying it's going to be tomorrow, but I think that America's dominance on the global stage is coming to an end. And we see it, by the way. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. I mean, you see it that there's countries trying to make an alternative currency to replace the dollar. And you see, stupid terrorists in Yemen taking on the United States. Like the United States and like its kind of glory days, I think, are really coming to an end. And again, what happens when that happens is anti-Semitism spikes. So, I don't think anti-Semitism is going anywhere. I think that's it. It's out of the bag. And, war or no war, I don't think that's going anywhere. The only difference between now and every other empire and every other kind of generation of anti-Semitism is that today we have, the state of Israel, where Jews can come and live, safely and securely. And we're not at the mercy of anyone else, because when we are at the mercy of other governments, we are at the mercy of, leaders. Well, we see how that worked out for us. So, it's a pretty worrisome situation as far as anti-Semitism is concerned. Pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, and it also feels like we're at a major point as far as just the future of the entire conflict. I've seen through your social media, it doesn't seem exactly that you support like the two-state solution idea that's, the Biden administration is always saying. So what's your kind of future hopes for this land?
So let's just frame this accurately. There has never been a Palestinian leader in the history of the world that agreed to a two-state solution. Like, They say it loud and clear every single day. And so the fact that anyone's still talking about a two-state solution is just preposterous. It's ridiculous. They say it loud and clear. We don't want a two-state solution. We want from the river to the sea, meaning no Israel. So let's not like flip it and say, oh, Israel doesn't want a two-state solution. It's not up to us. When our enemies, declare day and night that they want us obliterated and thrown into the ocean, then there's no talk about a two-state solution. As far as a solution, it's a complicated issue. I got to be honest with you. There's no easy fix here because it's not like, oh, we're going to beat Hamas and that'll be the end of it. I mean, their children are indoctrinated from age 0. So, you get rid of every single Hamas terrorist, the ideology stays, and those kids are going to grow up to be the next generation of Hamas. And so how do you make, how do you make peace or solve a conflict with someone who, their fundamental belief and ideology is that they want you dead, right? It's not like they're saying, oh, give us more land. I mean, Yasser Arafat had 95% of the West Bank given to him, 95%. And he said no, because that's not what they want. And again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. Just literally read their charter. I mean, it's online. Just read it. Hear what they say. And so the whole narrative of like, oh, Israel doesn't want a two-state solution. Israel doesn't want peace with the Palestinians. Israel's committing genocide. It's all just a bunch of false narratives that people say, again, to try to kind of scapegoat the Jews. But the reality is Israel's done an unprecedented amount, and brought initiatives to bring peace to this region. And every single time the Palestinians rejected it. And that is literally the story of the modern state of Israel from its founding, even before its founding in 1947. The Palestinians had a state, a partition plan with the UN. They said, here's your state. And they said, no, we don't want a state. We want no Israel. And they attacked and they lost. And they attacked again, and they lost, and they attacked again, and they lost, and they attacked again. And so, like, what is the world even talking about? Like, these people come in, like, oh, you have to return land. I'm like, where do you live? Like, you live in the United States. Are you kidding me right now? Like, go give back your land, and then we can have a discussion. It's just there's so much hypocrisy and double standards. It's staggering.
Obviously, you're in support. You're not in support of a two-state solution. I mean, what do you think it would look like for Israel to have its full one state, including West Bank, including Gaza? I mean, whatever that looks like for you. But what does that look like? What would happen to a lot of the Palestinians that are kind of causing a lot of the issues right now? And how do you think Israel should go about it if they were to go about a one state solution?
You've never heard any Israeli leader talk about a one-state solution. That's not what we stand for. We want peace. The Jewish people pray for peace, countless times throughout the day. So you'll never hear an Israeli say we are gonna, take over everything. In fact, Gaza, even though we're obviously there now with in war, no one's said that we're taking over Gaza. It's not even being discussed. What is being discussed is that we're going to kind of replicate the model of the West Bank, of Judean Samaria, which is they have their own towns, they have their own mayors, they have their own everything. Israel has security control. So if someone, is building, a terror tunnel or whatever it is, or accumulating weapons, Israel goes in, just like we do in Jenin, and just like we do in all of these places in the West Bank. And is it perfect? Absolutely not. But it is by far the best solution, which is let them govern themselves. Let them, you don't need us. You're not dependent on us. You have your own, towns, your own, water, your own electricity, your own internet. It's all you. But if you lift a gun and you, incite to terror and you want to come and kill Jews in Israel, then that is unacceptable, and we're going to have to take care of that. Again, it's not an ideal situation. Ideal situation would be that these millions and millions of Palestinians in Gaza would stop, inciting to murder Jews left and right, and we can make peace. But that clearly isn't. And by the way, it's not realistic because that's their entire identity. Again, the word Palestinian, as it refers to an Arab, was invented by Yasser Arafat, a terrorist who created the PLO in order to obliterate Israel. Like, that was literally his mission statement. So there's never been refugees that have increased in numbers over the generations other than Palestinians. This is their identity. Their identity is victim. We are being oppressed, and they can't get out of that, because without that, they have no identity. So there's really never going to be peace unless there's a fundamental change in Palestinian society. And, the chances of that happening as they continue to indoctrinate their kids are slim to none.
And you talk a lot about narratives, and people are changing the narratives to fit their, I guess, belief system and their views. Is there any way, like, do you see any path to help change this what people are doing with this narrative manipulation, whether that is things that the media could do, things that governments around the world could could and should be doing. What does that look like for you if it is possible?
I mean, it goes deeper than the narrative. I think, in Western society, in Western civilization, we've been taught time and time again to not use critical thinking. We've been told over and over and over again that what you see is not real, right? I'm looking at a man, you're telling me it's a cat. I'm like, but I see a man. You're like, no, 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 it's a cat. I'm like, I'm telling you, I'm looking at a man. You're telling me stop using critical thinking. So if I don't have to use critical thinking and I can call someone a flower because inside they're a flower, then when there's a war between good and evil, again, I'm not using critical thinking. You told me not to. So now I'm not using critical thinking, and now I can't differentiate between good and bad. So, it's a very fundamental problem that in Western civilization today, critical thinking or truth, absolute truths are not, I don't even think most people think there are such a thing as absolute truth, which is crazy. Uh, you know, Science is an absolute truth. And they're like, no, it's gender, forget gender. Like, so, I don't know that it's just the narrative. I think it's a much deeper problem. And I think there's another really deep problem, which is that Western society, by the way, because of, the fact that they're naive, it's not from a malicious place, but what many do, millions, what they do is they take core fundamental principles of Western society and they try to apply them to radical Islam. But radical Islam does not share those values. So, for example, if I treat you with respect, presumably you're going to reciprocate and treat me with respect. That's just a fundamental core belief of the Western world, the civilized world. But that's not how radical Islamists think. You can give them all the respect in the world, you're still an infidel. So we need to stop thinking, oh, we'll treat them well. Oh, the poor Palestinians need more money. That's not the case. That's not what they're looking for. And it's the irony of it all is that the very same people who say give them a state are the very same people who say, don't listen to them. They don't mean it. It's like, are they adults? If they're adults, they need to be held accountable. And then, okay, we can talk about a state. If they're children throwing a fit, then they don't deserve a state. Make up your mind.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing kind of on that, my question for you is, I feel like Israel is in such a tough place here because on one hand, um, they're trying to do what they have to do, and they obviously, they're being attacked, and they need to defend themselves. But on the other hand, I feel like Israel gets a lot of pressure, even and internally as well, to kind of please other nations and because of where they are geographically and they're vulnerable and how vulnerable they are with where they are and the type of people in power. So how, you know, in your opinion, like how does Israel handle that? Like who should they be? What should be guiding them right now in their decision making?
What should be guiding Israel is Israel. That's just straight up. Like Israel should be worried about Israel. Israel should defend itself. Israel should do what it has to do. Its obligation to defend its citizens. And anybody who has a problem with that, I'm sorry, but we're not going to not defend ourselves. And they say like you could take a Jew out of exile. You can't take exile out of a Jew. And like the mentality of we have to listen to foreign governments telling us what to do is a very exile mentality. Right, Jews have been exiled, in all of these countries and kicked out of all these countries over throughout our history, and now we're home and we have our military, we have our resources, we have our economy, but we're still stuck in the mindset of like, oh, is the world going to love us? You know what? The world's going to hate us no matter what. Like it's the craziness of them accusing us of genocide. Like if we were committing genocide, we wouldn't send one soldier into Gaza. We would just bomb from the air and that would be the end of it, right? We would save all our soldiers, the hundreds of people that we lost in this war. We put them there in harm's way to minimize civilian deaths on the Gaza side, and the world still says genocide. So there's nothing that we can do, and I know this is like a little bit of a cop out, but the reality is we've tried and tried and tried. We've done everything to please the world. It's the world just it is what it is. They're not going to stand by us. They never have and they never will, no matter what we do. And so we need to do what we need to do. We need to do what's right, morally, militarily. We need to do what's right for us. Period.
Yeah, going off that, you mentioned the soldiers. Been a tough week for the IDF. Like there was that incident with over 20 soldiers dying. Overall, it's kind of a tough week for the war in general. It's been like over 110 days, I think, since October 7, and you really rarely hear any word from about the hostages other than Israel and the Jewish community, I would say. I think that's fair to say. What's the resolve like right now when you go out and you speak to other Israelis? What are people feeling right now?
A lot of emotions, right? Obviously, we're in deep devastation, mourning. Uh, the whole country's traumatized, basically. On the one hand, on the other hand, we are very, very unified. We know what needs to be done. There's almost no one that debates or negates that. Everyone, we know what we need to do. But there is the frustration of, the government, unfortunately, taking United States government, the State Department into account. I don't think that that's moral in any way, shape, or form. I think again, we need to do what's right for us. And so, sending in aid, what kind of country sends in, hundreds? I think 10,000 trucks have been sent into Gaza. What kind of country sends in humanitarian aid to an enemy state that just butchered and raped and kidnapped its innocent people? Who does that? Only Israel does that, because the world says, oh, the Palestinians need humanitarian aid. It's the most insane thing in the world. And so there's a lot of frustration in Israel of like, why are we sending humanitarian aid to an enemy state? And so now there's protests by the border between Gaza and Israel. There are, families of hostages who are protesting, not letting in the trucks, because it's just absolutely insane that they are holding our hostages and we are sending in thousands of trucks and not sending anything else, any hostages out. It is literally absurd.
So there's a lot of talks right now about another possible ceasefire, and Hamas just rejected a 2-month ceasefire plan. What are your thoughts on that? Is even having a ceasefire and trying to negotiate, is it worth it anymore?
Again, we have to understand the fundamental thing here, and that is that Hamas is radical Islam. They have one ideal, and that is kill Jews. Like, if there's one Hamas terrorist left at the end of this war that can still kill Jews, they've won as far as they're concerned, which is of course ridiculous, but that's how they view it. And so, anything that will prevent them from accomplishing their mission of killing more and more Jews, from their perspective, it's a hard no. Israel obviously values life. It is our absolute top value. And so we would do anything to bring our hostages back. But, if we do something to get our hostages back, in other words, to save lives, and that whatever it is that we do will cause more loss of life, then obviously that's not a logical thing to do. So some of the things that Hamas has demanded in terms of, deals of letting all their prisoners out and pulling completely out of Gaza. Like, are you nuts? Like, after October 7th, we're not leaving until Hamas is, gone. So, I think, listen, I would not want to be in the government's shoes right now to make these decisions. It's really tragic. I mean, you got the hostages and the hostages' families on the one hand, but you have this need to get rid of Hamas. And those things generally are mutually exclusive, because if you're going to get your hostages back, you're going to have to negotiate with Hamas. And if you're going to destroy Hamas, you're not going to get your hostages back. So it's a really rough spot to be in. And I don't know, what the solution is here at all.
And touching on talking about like the tough spot that the government is in right now. What are your thoughts? I just wanted to get your thoughts on the government's leadership during all of this, and specifically Netanyahu's leadership and their response to this world pressure. What are your thoughts on that? And what and also your thoughts on a lot of the pressure from even Israelis that and their disapproval for Netanyahu, and their want for him to be gone.
Right. So it's a complicated answer, and there's nuance in this, like most things in life. And you have to understand that the internet does not have room for nuance. It doesn't facilitate nuance. Everything has to be black and white. That's not how real life is. There's nuance. And the nuance is that, on the one hand, Netanyahu is probably the only person in this country who can withstand the pressure Israel's being put under right now on the diplomatic, global stage. And I can't even imagine like Lapid or any of these other guys withstanding the pressure. They just don't have that ability. So that's on the good side. The bad side is, there's absolutely no way that, a person can remain prime minister after what happened on October 7th. That's a colossal failure. I mean, whether or not there was intel, whether or not, someone warned you, doesn't even matter. Just by the fact that this happened under his, watch, he has to leave. There's no question about it. Having said that, I don't particularly know who can replace him. I can't, there are very few people in this country that have, the ability to lead, the rhetoric, the ability to get up on the UN stage or the Congress and speak in a way that really, inspires, or whatever it may be, whatever you want to call it, like Netanyahu. with all of his downsides. In other words, there's many things that are said about him. I'm not going to go into it, but I'm not a Netanyahu fan. I didn't vote for Netanyahu, but I think he's one of the greatest leaders, irrelevant to politics, just his ability to speak and his ability. But this is, I don't think any person, any prime minister, any president, anything can survive after this type of an atrocity, this type of absolute disaster. So he's definitely gone after this. Who's going to replace him? I literally have no idea.
Just to be clear about when you said Netanyahu resisting the U.S. pressure, what U.S. pressure? What do you mean when you say U.S. pressure?
I mean, Biden's, we know Biden and Netanyahu speak on a daily basis, and all of the humanitarian aid that's going in, and the switching of phases in the war from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 is all because of Biden, and Biden's pressuring because of his elections. So I just think that it's a lot of pressure. It's not only from Biden. We have the international law. There's a lot going on right now in the UN, et cetera. And, the ability to fight a war, an existential war under that type of pressure, you have to grow a pair, as we say. So there's a lot of pressure on Netanyahu, a lot of pressure. Some of the pressure, he buckled under the pressure, and some he didn't. But, there's very few people that I can think of who will be able to withstand that type of pressure. One of them is Bennett, but, that's a whole different discussion.
And why do you think, why do you believe that he's one of the only ones who can withstand that pressure?
Because he's a seasoned leader. He's been a politician for a long time. He's been around the block. He has unbelievable verbal abilities. I just think he's a very charismatic, charismatic leader that had relationships that he's forged and built over the years. And I just, to imagine like a young politician who's never done anything to go and stand up against the world and everything that's going on, it would be impossible.
And as this war continues, and this pressure on Israel continues, what are some of the talking points and the trends right now that you're keeping an eye on moving forward?
What are some of the trends in terms of what?
In terms of, I feel like throughout this whole conflict, there's kind of been trends or different talking points. First, like, October 7th, trends in like, resistance is just to justify what people are occupied.
Like you're talking about like phrases, like from the river to the sea,
Not
like
necessarily phrases, but I guess what yeah, I mean, I guess kind of phrases too, but what trends in what do you think is going to happen when it comes to in terms of the next kind of pressures that are being put on Israel? Because you're talking about how like the phases of the war. What do you think? What further pressure do you think Israel is going to get as this conflict continues?
I mean, we're seeing unbelievable pressure again. International Court of Justice. We see the UN. It's never been like this, and it's wild to see that this came after October 7th, which was so clearly, like evil, and how the world stands with Hamas is just unbelievable to see. And so, the phrases and, the pressure, it's just, in my opinion, the modern day master anti-Semitism. And you see these videos going around where like, from the river to the sea, and then someone walks around and says, what river and what sea? And they have absolutely no idea. It's a joke, whether they're being paid or whatever it is. These things are empty slogans. And, these people make a lot of noise, but they're the minority by far. They're not the majority. So, we take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, it's sad, it's scary. People do this every week, but it doesn't impact my life, and it shouldn't impact Israel's.
I saw you I think you reposted this about Bill Ackman buying a percentage of the Tel Aviv stock exchange. Overall, there's been kind of the diaspora Jews and the Israeli Jews. There's been a huge awakening in the diaspora, people feeling a lot more connected to Israel. Were you surprised when that happened after October 7, or did you expect
that Jews unified, you're saying?
Yeah, because there's like, I've been seeing people talking about it, that there was kind of a loss of connection with Israel in the past few years with American Jews who had never been, maybe.
Yeah. So that's another thing that comes, as part of the script, is the assimilation and, things like that. I think, no, it's not surprising. When you have a common enemy, you unify. That's just human nature.
And obviously, as a tech guy, what do you think? Do you think that technology has had a huge impact in the rise of anti-Semitism since October 7th and the anti-Israel and anti-Jewish sentiment, whether that's uh, social media or any other forms of media out there?
Yeah, of course, so social media is playing a very critical role in this war. Not just in this war, in the last, the conflicts of the last probably decade. Um, and technology is playing a serious role when it comes to the terror tunnels, there's drones, and technology is playing a very pivotal role in this war across the board.
But what can be done in terms of social media platforms? Um, what do you think should be done with, I mean, just tremendous amounts of anti-Semitism and I would say incitement of violence. I mean, support of terrorist organizations across social media platforms. I think it's a huge problem.
It is a real problem, and the next person I wouldn't want to be in his shoes is Elon Musk, because where do you draw the line? Obviously, hate speech is hate speech, but where do you draw that line? It's not an easy thing to do, and so I see an insane amount of hate speech, coming at me on Twitter and other platforms, and I know that Elon Musk stands for free speech, but there's got to be a red line where a person, says these things, and you're like, this is not okay. You know what I mean?
Hello, I mean that's all the thoughts that we have, but is there anything that you want our listeners to know that maybe we didn't discuss, or any pressing things that you really want I guess young people like us to know?
Yeah, I just think that, people have to have intellectual integrity. I think people have to, look at facts and not be so influenced by propaganda. Just the very fact that people are talking about, tens of thousands of casualties in Gaza is, ridiculous, because where are those numbers from? They're from Hamas. Like, what kind of person with a half a brain doesn't understand that they're taking information from a terrorist organization, that it's inaccurate, you know? But the world just kind of regurgitates all these lies. So I would say to your audience, like, you have a brain, use it.
Do you have any recommendations of where people can go for information to educate themselves on Israel and the conflict over the years?
My Twitter feed.
Twitter.
Which, no, I mean, listen, I've done many videos on YouTube, about the history and the facts, and there's a lot. If you want to know the truth, there's a lot of sources to learn the facts without believing propaganda.
Okay, great. All right, Hillel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Really
you. We know you're
appreciate it.
busy.
Yeah,
I saw you posting today. You were had so many meetings today with the company with Visegrad 24.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, man. Yeah, thanks for having me. And,
Yeah, thank
looking
you
forward
so
to hearing
much.
the recording. All right, guys. Take
Thank
care.
you.
All right, have a good one. All right, guys, that was our conversation with Israeli tech experts, tech entrepreneur, and Israeli advocate Hillel Fuld, and we really hope you enjoyed that conversation. I know, Levi, I know me and you did. It was a very insightful one. What did you think about it? What takeaways did you have from that conversation?
First of all, I'll just say it's good. It's interesting I really like that we're having a lot of interviews and different perspectives on, because I like to hear, and I think I like how our style is done, kind of, because we just are asking questions, and then now is the time for us to, like, kind of, I'm not interested in debating someone that we're having on, because the reason we're having people on is to just hear their perspectives and listen. And Hillel Fuld definitely was deserving of sharing his perspective on this. Very interesting person. His brother was killed in a terrorist attack in, I think, 2018 was when it was.
I remember it was like early high school.
Heroic. He really it was a heroic and really sad incident.
Yeah.
Ari Fuld, right? That was his
Ari
name.
Fuld.
Let
me double check.
Check his name. But yeah, there were a few things in our interview that I disagree with, and we can get into that. But I guess I'll just ask what you thought of him.
I mean, look, do I agree on everything he says? No, but I think that a lot of his perspectives come from a very important and logical place. I think he's right on a lot of things, that there is this. He talked a lot about shifting narratives, changing what the actual truth is, or changing what a few pieces of truth, and shifting it in a way that shapes the narrative you want to that you want to say, and they want the world to see. So there was a lot of that. A lot of the things that he said about ideologically, where those things come from. I agree on a lot of it, but not all of it. He was tying in like LGBTQ issues and stuff like that, and how a lot of the same ideologies come from that, and how kind of talking about like I mean like look like there's truth to a lot of what he was saying. I don't agree with like everything. I think because in our podcast we've gotten a lot of perspectives from more views that are more progressive or more on the left leaning political scale. So it's very important to
Really?
get. Yeah, I would think so. I mean,
okay.
what do you think? I don't know.
No, I don't know. I mean, I would say that it's been pretty moderate.
I mean, yeah,
I would say.
I mean, look. It's been pretty moderate, but I mean, comparably, I mean, like, let's compare this to like the rest of like Jewish Orthodoxy. I would say it's like pretty on the
Okay.
low
He
side.
definitely he was the furthest right of any guest that we've had so far on the podcast. And the big question that I wanted to ask him at first, because maybe the cliche, the big question about the two-state solution. I referred to just his social media posts, but I didn't like say specific ones because I just wanted to give him the platform to answer the question. But I remember seeing about a month ago when he posted on social media, and it was like the comment was, from the river to the sea is Israel is all you'll see. So that was what he posted on social media a month ago. So my whole thing is like, if you believe that the from the river to the sea chant is a genocidal chant for Jews to get thrown into the sea, or like where are the Jews gonna go, it's how can you? It's hypocritical to make a statement on the other side, because at the end of the day, and the two-state solution, like right now, obviously, you would ask any Israeli, they don't want a two-state solution at this moment, and you would ask most Palestinians do not want a two-state solution at this moment.
What you're saying that
say.
if you ask most Israelis, they wouldn't want a two-state solution
right now, like not at this moment. Like I don't think that they're ready for a complete withdrawal from the West Bank right now. I mean, a lot of people feel that this is what happened in the Gaza Strip. Yeah. And, if you withdraw from the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, it's not like...
I mean, we could obviously talk about what that two-state solution looks like. I know that, obviously the West Bank is huge territory in terms of territory for Israeli, for this protection of Israel, because it pretty much overlooks all the civilian areas in Israel. So, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. But, like... Would I say that most Israelis don't want a two-state solution?
No, I don't mean. I mean at this moment.
Okay.
I mean down the road. I think everyone wants. Most Israelis understand that. Yeah. Listen, we're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a state with everyone living side by side is not going to work. Eventually, there will have to be a two-state solution. But for it to like, a lot of people in the international community are saying, well, now's the time. We have to institute the two-state solution. Yeah. And I think that right now is the time to maybe put some building blocks towards that. Get to work with the Saudis, with the Gulf states. Try to build some connections there. But
yeah, I know that. Like, I've also been looking through Hillel Fuld's Twitter and stuff like that. And one of the things I think he either reposted or I think he tweeted was like, I believe in a 1 to like 50 something state solution where like Israel is like the one state, and then the Arab states, Arab nations have like their other 50 other countries. And I mean, it's a tough conversation because on one hand, people really haven't been identifying as necessarily like Palestinian or wanting to kind of really self-determine or have like a self-determining state of Palestine really until after the Ottomans. When people weren't identifying themselves as Palestinians during the Ottoman Empire, they're identifying themselves as Ottoman Arabs. And even after that, even after the Ottoman Empire fell, they were still identifying themselves as Arabs. Most, like the large majority of people in the British mandated Palestine, they were still identifying themselves as Arabs. It wasn't until a lot later. So I understand the fact that like, okay, there really isn't any reason to give Palestine, to give like a state of Palestine, because like what, we're just going to give all these people a state just because they just very recently started wanting to have self-determination.
Well, if I could jump in here, because so this whole concept of a nation state wasn't as popular back then, in the time you're talking about, the Ottoman times. And when you have this kind of collapse of empires, right, everything is chopping everything up, right? Africa, we're chopping it up. We're going to make these countries based on these borders. India, Pakistan, like we're chopping that.
Yeah.
The Muslims there, the Hindus there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like with Israel, Palestine, I mean, that was, the idea of the British in that case.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the problem with the post, and I didn't see this post, the 1 to 50 state solution is, you could argue about whatever when the Palestinian national identity was formed, but at the end of the day, there is a Palestinian national identity. You know what I mean? And
that's what I was going to get into.
Right. Okay. So I'll let you pick it up.
Yeah, it was like
then.
at the same time, there is a Palestinian national identity, and I do believe that they do deserve a land to towards self-determination and to live the way they want to live and to rule the way they want to rule. I just think, though, that will the world, let's say hypothetically, Israel has their land, Palestine has their land, and you just make a huge wall in between and let's not bother each other and whatever. Do you think that the large majority of Palestinians would want that? Or let's say they have that, I feel like they're still going to be very salty about that they don't have the entire land of Israel, where they don't have the entire land. And I still think these terrorist groups are going to pop up. They're going to bomb Israel. And then what? Of course, Israel's going to have to defend itself. And do you think the world's going to defend Israel after that? We had a deal. We're going to separate ourselves. We're going to make a wall or whatever. Not going to bother each other. Once one person starts attacking the other, the other obviously must attack the other to defend themselves. I think because of this ingrained anti-Semitism, this ingrained hypocrisy, I don't think the world's going to still stand with Israel on this. I don't know. I think it's just a complete cycle of Israel's folding, and then after that it's just there's still reasons to critique Israel for just doing the things that they need to do. I don't know. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's complicated. So, I mean, there are 700,000 people that I guess would be considered settlers that live in the West Bank.
Yeah.
You could argue whatever, this location, but, there would be a lot of questions, are they all leaving, or under the Palestinian state, would there be, in Israel, there's 20% Arabs living in Israel. So if there would be a Palestinian state, you ask the question, well, can there be a minority of Jews living in the Palestinian state? And most people would say no.
Yeah.
And then I would ask you, well, I mean, what type of Palestinian state is this going to be that's going to be established in the West Bank? Mm-hmm. So it has a lot of nuance. It's a tricky situation. I think, we understand that the biggest reason why Hamas did this attack was because of the upcoming normalization agreement with Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
People understand, and a lot of people, Saudis, UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, are all understanding that, listen, this isn't, it's not good for people, right? This conflict is hurting everything, right? Think about the economy that can grow between ties with Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Biden was talking about a railroad through Jordan and Saudi Arabia to Israel. These are good things that are happening.
Yeah.
And, this Hamas and, Iran, they're feeling strangled. They felt strangled by these agreements. The Palestinians especially, because they felt that this is a far-right government in Israel, and it's making a deal with the Saudis. And the Saudis aren't even asking for any Palestinian guarantees or anything. They're pretty much abandoning the Palestinian issue.
Yeah. Because a lot of what happened, especially, when we're talking about the Yom Kippur War, 6-Day War, stuff like that. Well, actually, sorry, no, not that, but a lot of the intifadas and stuff like that, the uprisings, Palestinians started to believe that we can't just wait for these other countries to liberate us. We're going to liberate ourselves, and that's kind of what happened here. It's like a quote unquote liberation. It's, and yeah, I guess they must have gotten upset about that Israel is trying to reach out and for peace in these strong nations, and yeah, like think about the opportunities that would come up here. I mean, think about the history of Jews and Arabs. It used to be that the relationship between Jews and Muslims and Arabs was so much stronger than the relationship between Jews and Christians. I mean, look at the communities that popped up in Yemen, Morocco, and we were able to be free in these countries. I mean, Egypt as well. The Rambam, Maimonides, wrote the Mishnah Torah in Cairo. So I mean, just think about being able to get to that place again is so important and would be so beneficial, not just to Israel, but just to the Arab world as a whole. And I guess, yeah, like, you know, that I guess that doesn't fit into the quote unquote Palestinian liberation.
Yeah, because the liberation movement is not about peace, you know?
No, it's not.
Unfortunately, that is the dominating movement among the Palestinians at the moment. And of course, you know, the Israeli government not interested in a two-state solution either at the moment. So
yeah,
hard to see anything. Another thing that Hillel Fuld said on the podcast was he was kind of Biden bashing a little bit. For humanitarian aid. He brought up the point. He was like, why should Israel supply the Palestinians with humanitarian aid? And we saw protests the other day actually at the border against trucks bringing in humanitarian aid. I mean, you have to supply humanitarian aid at the end of the day. And the humanitarian aid, I mean, I know it's a tricky situation, right? Like everything is, because there are videos that Hamas is taking the humanitarian aid. They're not using it for the people, but at the end of the day, how is humanitarian aid supposed to get into the people of Gaza other than just driving it in through trucks? I mean, Egypt brings some. I mean, Egypt could be helping more, but I mean, it's Egypt, you know. It's not a very moral government, you know. So
Egypt could be helping more. Jordan could be helping more.
Right, Jordan. Yeah, they've done like a few airlifts or something. I don't know, but it's definitely an important situation because it's a humanitarian catastrophe, and a lot of countries are helped, like France, pitching in a lot with like an aircraft carrier, with like a hospital on the aircraft carrier. So,
I mean, look, I get it, because I get the whole idea of why are we sending humanitarian aid into Gaza when all that humanitarian aid, or the large majority of it, is just going to go to Hamas and go into their tunnels anyways, and it's not going to go to the people that really need it most. I mean, like we've seen time and time again, even these Al Jazeera interviews, like these Al Jazeera journalists are going up to these people and they're saying, no, we're not getting any of this humanitarian aid. And
but it's different from like, okay, fuel. The fuel was a big thing at the beginning, and it became pretty clear that the fuel was just being used to fire rockets. 100%. And it was actually funny because in the first few weeks that fuel was being brought into to Gaza, you could literally see, like, the day that they would bring fuel, like the next 2 days, there would be so many more rockets being fired, and then the fuel would stop off, and then there would be not as many rockets. So fuel is a different thing. But when you're talking about humanitarian aid, food, water, I don't see any other option. Like, no one can present me with it's not a perfect solution, you know, and obviously
I think the only way to make sure that the
Red Cross would be great to
help
out.
If they were like moral. I think the only way, like, if I were like America and I were Israel and I'd be like giving aid, is I would give aid if I knew for certain that was going to go to the people who need it, to the actual civilians. And I don't see how that's going to happen. I don't. With how much of an influence Hamas has on its people and how much of a stronghold it has, I don't know if that's going to happen. I mean, like, yes, we could pour millions or billions of dollars into this, it's all going to go to Hamas. We're still going to see starving civilians everywhere, and civilians that are suffering, and that further is going to make Israel look bad. They're going to pay so much money just for them to still look bad. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yes. But we have seen protests in Gaza in the past few days. Specifically.
Yeah, which is very good. It's a good sign.
Someone could make the point that you're sending in humanitarian aid for the people, the civilians, and this terrorist organization is stealing the aid. The people are more encouraged. I mean, what this aid is for them, and they have to understand. They have to understand that this organization is not acting in their goodwill.
Yeah.
And I brought up the Red Cross jokingly, which just pretty much just appears for photo ops. That infuriated me so much when those hostage deals were going down, and like it would be the Red Cross driving the. It's like, what's even the point? Like, why are the Red Cross even doing this? Like, they're not. What? They're just taxi drivers? I mean, I thought this was supposed to be some sort of humanitarian. They've done nothing. I haven't seen them do anything. All of these international organizations, UNRWA, that we've talked about a lot on the podcast.
They just found out that a lot of UNRWA employees participated in the October 7th massacre.
Yeah, so right now 12 have been suspended for we haven't seen the evidence yet, but UNRWA has suspended them.
And
a lot of countries have cut aid.
Yeah.
U.S., Canada, France today cut aid from this organization because it's just clear that it's just an indoctrination. And these people should be ashamed of themselves. This was people from Europe. This was a lot of Scandinavian countries, specifically people working, and it's just filling people's heads with Nazi rhetoric. Really, it's absurd.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's very absurd. And another thing I wanted to talk about with our interview with Hillel Fuld is he has a lot of trust in Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah.
And I understand where that's coming, because he's saying that he basically said that he's the only one who's strong enough to stand up to this pressure that the world is putting on him, and he's the only leader that could. He's the only person that could lead Israel right now in this time of war, based on how long he has been in power and his experience. I can't see it. He causes so much more issues than he produces good things for Israel. I mean, yes, it's a lot of that does have to do with the worldwide perception of Israel, but it's a lot of the rhetoric that is now being spewed by Israelis now, that is just so it's very kind of genocidal rhetoric. A lot of Jews are now are not just Jews, but just Israelis in general. Like the hatred of Arabs is rampant right now, and I think a lot of that has to do with the strong right wing government that is led by Benjamin Netanyahu. And what, you're telling me that you can't have somebody like Benny Gantz or another strong Israeli politician to lead? I just don't understand why it has to be Netanyahu when really, honestly, it seems like the large majority of Israelis don't want this anymore.
Yeah, I think Hillel Fuld he made like despairing remarks towards Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid, who was the previous prime minister, on our interview. Benny Gantz, there was an interesting article about him that we can link that I was reading about him in the New York Times. And I don't see how someone like that wouldn't be a better option right now. A military person. And part of Hillel Fuld's, what he was saying was that, and I'm not putting words in his mouth, but he was kind of guided by the idea that, like, since the world doesn't care, a lot of the world doesn't care about Israel or has negative feelings towards it, like, screw it, basically. Like, we need to do what we need to do. Like, Benjamin Netanyahu is standing against this pressure from the Biden administration,
Yeah.
And I would say that the Biden administration is also under pressure. I mean, everyone has elections.
Well, Biden
you know?
is very much under pressure because
Under pressure,
he needs his election win for sure.
Election is important, and I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about him advising to scale down the intensity of the combat in Gaza,
Yeah.
that's a result of the pressure on him, but also just the worldwide pressure. I mean, it's looking out for Israel. Like the situation cannot go on in a high intensity war for months and months and months. You know, it's just not attainable.
I just don't know if I agree that. Look, Israel obviously they can't just be doing what they're doing based on the pressure that's being put on them.
Of course not. Yeah.
But at the same time, they really do need to make sure that the world is still on their side, or these countries are still on their side, because if they abandon Israel, Israel is cooked. I mean, yes, they have so much of that. Their tech is amazing, and the things that they're able to create, that whether that's the Iron Dome or the new the laser protection systems that they have there, and the list goes on and on of their technological advancements. But they need the money to be able to do those things, and they need the support of the world to because if they don't have that world support, the UN the UN votes could look really horrible for Israel, and they're going to it's going to further radicalize a lot of Arabs and in that region to create further attacks on them, because they're getting that support from the other countries, these other huge countries. So I think that it could really bite them in the butt if they go a little bit too far.
I think Israel needs to focus on the countries that matter to them specifically, because the UN, like the UN passes more condemnations, like pre-October 7, pre any of this, like every year the UN is passing more condemnations of Israel than any other country, which is just like absurd. And how are you as an Israeli supposed to interpret that as anything other than like they're out to get us?
Of course,
the UN,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So the two things can be true at the same time, right? Relationships with allies are really important, but worrying about, I mean, the UN, like, how is Israel expected? And I do see what he's saying here in this case, where it's like, how can Israel trust the UN anymore? I mean, they were supposed to handle the northern border, like with Lebanon, and Hezbollah just only grew stronger. They were supposed to help the people of Gaza, and instead they made this organization that indoctrinates them. So it's pretty much a useless organization. That being said, like countries like the United States, England, France, those are important allies. And Israel, they're not cooked in the literal sense. Like, yeah, they're a nuclear country. Like, war with Iran would just devastate everyone in the region, you know? But as far as GDP, as far as trade, you know, it's very important for Israel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, Netanyahu is he's always been praised as that sort of strong man figure. The security, he's always been the security guy.
Yeah.
But this has been the worst security disaster in Israel's history. So for that alone, of course, in the next election he'll be voted out. But more
do you think so?
Yeah, definitely.
Why do you think that?
It's just every single poll, like his approval rating is like around like 20%, pretty much in every single poll.
Okay.
It's just when the election is going to happen.
'Cause these polls could really manipulate. Could really be a little like it. It doesn't mean anything until once elections and campaigns really start getting their roll on.
I mean, but these are huge. Like these are huge drops in like Likud polling numbers.
Sure.
Like, in every poll pretty much conducted, it's some of the lowest approval ratings.
Sure, it's just I don't know, based on the last couple of elections and how things have turned out.
Where, in Israel or the United States?
In Israel, I mean, like, come on, like it's a very especially the people in the West Bank are very pro Netanyahu, and it's just I don't know. We'll see, but sometimes it's always just kind of.
Well,
you
okay.
never know.
According to the polls right now, Benny Gantz's party would be the number one party. Into the Knesset. But the question is, like, when is that election going to happen? A lot of people are apprehensive, like switching leaders during wartime, which I get. But we switched. I mean, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, died during
Yeah,
World War
but that's
II.
because he died.
No, it is, of course, because he died. But I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing to switch leaders in wartime.
I mean,
you know?
like, I get that, but like, I mean, look at Ukraine. I mean, they're withholding elections because they're in a war situation too. Vladimir Zelensky's still in power. I mean, I think Vladimir Zelensky's done a great job. So I think in that case, because keep him in power. I think,
and Ukraine is something, by the way, I'd like to further discuss on this podcast. Maybe if we could have an episode about that as well.
Yeah, we could do that. But just a quick thing on that. I think it's just so funny how there's just so many people who are like, a lot of the people who are in support of Ukraine are also in support of are very also anti-Israel. But it's funny how Ukraine is a strong supporter of Israel.
Right. Well, because it's essentially the same conflict, right? These are all proxy wars, like Iran supplying Russia with drones to attack Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's all the same thing. And Taiwan is the same exact situation as well.
I think they kind of see Ukraine as like that smaller country to Russia, and they're kind of like they're the ones being attacked here, and they're being invaded. Yeah. Hillel Fuld was talking about, it's the underdog mentality. People love an underdog, and I think people view Israel as the Russia and Gaza as the Ukraine, and I think that the context is just being so the context here is being so manipulative right now. I don't know. It's just
and that was another thing, because since the Ukraine war started, Israel had a shaky view. They were trying to both sides it. There were a few reasons for that.
Yeah, Israel was on a shaky ground.
Very shaky ground. And Zelensky was always has been very pro-Israel, and since October 7 happened, even asked to there was a little bit of confusion because he wanted to come to Israel, but he wasn't invited or whatever. Yeah. So there's always been kind of a weird thing. I think Israel
kind of bit themselves in the butt there.
Very much
I
so.
think if they had stronger support of Ukraine, I think that people would look at Israel more favorably right now. But I think that's a small factor. I don't think that really fits in too much with how the world would perceive them right now.
No. I just think it's more important for like Israel and Ukraine to have
strong relations.
Yeah,
I think so too.
That's important too. There was a lot of worry because like Russia was involved in Syria, but at this point, Russia has pretty much been pro-Hamas in the past few months. Yeah. So a wake-up lesson, wake-up call. You can't appease a country like Russia and a person like Vladimir Putin.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
There are reasons because, a lot of Russian Jews, that sort of thing, but the reasons out the window as far as I'm concerned.
And also, I mean, the Russian Jewish community in Russia is a sliver of what it used to be. I mean, I don't know. Like, most Russian Jews hate Russia.
Some living in Israel are like weirdly like anti. Oh, okay. Well, it's a confusing thing with Russia, Ukraine. A lot of people have negative views of Ukraine because during World War II, the Ukrainian fascist units were some of the most brutal in the world. I remember I was in Israel 2 years ago and I was speaking to a Holocaust survivor, and he told me that like the Ukrainians were worse than the Nazis, the one, just the specific ones that that they were dealing with. Like, so what they did was horrific. And I think that kind of still echoes. And there's, that whole, a lot of people are sympathetic to the Russians because of, the Red Army liberating a lot of the camps. But it's just such, then before that you had pogroms. Mm-hmm. So it's just such a weird kind of thought process.
Yeah, it's so weird, so nuanced. But you gotta. Yeah, I understand. Like, they were very brutal in World War II, but I mean, come on. I mean, this is a completely different.
No, I was just explaining.
There's been so many changes to Ukrainian's government right now. They're really in like. Honestly, before this, they were in a really good trajectory. Honestly, I thought trying to make themselves a better democracy.
Right.
So
yeah.
I think that this is a country that has a lot of promise, a lot of hope. So I think it's really important to stand by them right now, Ukraine.
And it's kind of being not talked about that much right now. And
yeah,
it's a dire situation right now.
It's tough because, Israel's the biggest thing right now.
Right.
But it's really tough because Ukrainian soldiers are tired. It's the fight's been going on for so long. It's very it's tough. It's tough.
And the Congress was kind of has been holding up that sort of package of aid for Ukraine and a little bit for Israel because of the discussion over the border, which now has gone into a whole thing with Texas. Have you been reading into the
Somebody
situation?
just got some impeachment inquiries into him. Who was it?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't see that. Like who? Like Greg Abbott?
Nobody in Texas.
No, because there's a whole thing with Greg Abbott defying the Supreme Court ruling about the border situation, pretty much, because he keeps sending people to stop the migrants coming in, and then the National Guard is like, no, blah blah blah. So it's been a whole thing, and now like a lot of like social media, Twitter is like making jokes about it, like Civil War jokes or whatever. But yeah,
no one thought that the migrant issue would get into 2 Jews 10 opinions, but here we are right now. I think we're getting a little bit on time. We're running a little bit out of time, but Levi, is there anything else that you want to end off this episode with?
No. I mean, the news that we saw this morning was like 3 soldiers, United States soldiers were killed in Jordan, and I think the number was started at 24 when I woke up, but then I saw it was like 34. So I don't know what the exact number of wounded soldiers is right now, but the problem with like us doing news on this podcast is like it becomes kind of not relevant by the time that we
can tell you our takes on the news.
Yeah, so I mean, I would think that this is a pretty serious escalation from what I see. So we'll have to see what happens with that. So
yeah, I don't want to make any assumptions about what's going to happen because it just seems like there's just so much tension right now in the Middle East. We saw Pakistan and Iran as well. There's been tension there.
Wouldn't that be an interesting outcome to this, Pakistan and Israel making?
Yeah, it would be really
making it. But I saw that they already like signed the deal. They were like, oh my bad.
Squashed the
beef.
They
squashed
the beef.
And Iran squashed the beef.
All right.
It was too good to be true.
Yeah, I know. yeah. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how that works. All right, I think we're gonna end it there. I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode and our interview with Hillel Fuld. And please, if you enjoy this episode, let us know. We really want to hear from you guys. Or if you enjoyed any of the other episodes, we really want to hear from you.
And if you have someone that you want to be on a guest on our podcast, please let us know as well, because we always want new guests.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Yeah.
We have a couple of guests that we are brainstorming right now, and that we kind of have on deck for the next couple of episodes. So stay tuned for that. But we really have been appreciating your guys' support so far. So just keep on listening and interacting with us, and yeah, it's gonna be a great time. So yeah, thank you guys so much. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you guys.